Oh, we're live. I was just getting the graphic the right size. Right, didn't quite work then. So yes, today we were talking about NI in the ESFP. I'm going to quickly go over to the diagram. Yes, and doing this with a tired Jeff, so I'm up against the biological clock. So we've got so this function is in this block, which is the self-affirmation block, and which is like, well, in the blue one, FI is in there, so ESFP like staying true to themselves, and NI, well, we'll see what that looks like in a moment. Apparently, this is theoretically this is manipulative, but I'm not really sure how you can manipulate an SE DOM with NI. Not really sure. Unless it's giving them a sense of direction, we'll have to see what the bullet points say, and then hear what Jeff says. Yeah, this is the green is equivalent to the inferior function in Jung and MBTI. The Model 8 is equivalent is the suggestive function. Oh yeah, and Dario said that it is used in tandem with the lead function, and he said that on page 194 of his book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. I'll show that in a moment. And theoretically, this block is an internalities, so it works at close range when the person is comfortable, when they're comfortable at close range, like on their own topic or just close to someone psychologically. When they're operating outside of their zone, the external functions repress it. Right, so now I'll go over to the, in fact, now I'll stop this. And so it's in that book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership by Dario Nardi. And now we're going to go over to, right, so I've done that. And now I'm going to put the tote model on screen for 5 seconds. We won't talk about it, but we'll put it on screen for 5 seconds, and you can think about it yourselves, folks. And if you want to see the crystal video, that's 3 hours long, and then we really go through the tote model. So there's no need to go through it again. Right. So in fact, that's where Jeff
saying toke or tope.
Tote.
Tote.
Tote. But I don't put a big T on it. So so yeah. Yes, T-O-T-E. Tote. And
so it's a model that's carrying a tote bag.
Maybe. Well, we'll go through that. Well, since you're watching the video, Jeff, with Crystal and I, we talk about it for about half an hour, so you'll get to learn about it that way.
Okay.
So, folks, we really want to know about this.
I flipped a coin. I was at work, and I flipped a coin as to whether I was going to listen to music or listen to videos, and tails won, so I listened to videos.
Right. Excellent. So anyway, so we talk about it in depth. So if folks want to know about this, see the Crystal video where she's eating the banana in the thumbnail. I checked, yes. And I even asked you if I could use that thumbnail. Yeah, totes. So there we go. So we'll stop that. So that's that done. There we go. Now we go straight to the bullet points. Bullet points, bullet points, bullet points. And this is where Jeff becomes the star.
What are you talking about? I'm always the star.
In the hangout, because I've been talking so far.
Well,
and
yeah, you know.
But yeah, you are a star.
Everyone needs a good opening act.
Oh, thank you very much. I should take that as a compliment. Right. Let's now sometimes in Victor you get some idiosyncratic, some quirky bits. Right.
That sounds painful.
Right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom in on these two blocks. Interestingly, individual desires. I'm glad he's put here if he is well educated, you know, so it is possible for an ESFP to be well educated, unlike some of the stereotypes we get. But I don't know, Bill Clinton being one, but I don't know what the. Anyway, there we go. First bullet point. This I'll read it out for the people who are watching it on their mobile phone and can't read it. When relaxed, likes to give way to sadness, to re-experience past events, or complain of having been misunderstood. Take it away, Jeff.
I'm not sure what the first part means. Likes to give away to sadness.
Become depressed?
What?
Maybe it means become depressed?
Well, I don't like to become depressed.
I suppose it's about nostalgia, I suppose.
I do like to re-experience past events, which sometimes does make me sad. In terms of sort of lament, you know, how things are now versus how they were. You know, I miss like the old sports stadiums from my childhood and stuff like that, because a lot of them have been torn down.
Could you say why you like them?
Because they're cool.
Okay, what were the little quirks that you liked?
Well, it's just all, you know, like I like all the stuff everybody else disses. Like, you know, people talk about like AstroTurf and people act like it was this horrible thing. But, you know, I went to the Astrodome. My dad brought me there when I was like 11 or 12 years old to see the Astros play. And to me, it was awesome. The bright, shiny green AstroTurf and the big, colorful seats. And, you know, on the outside, it just looks like this giant thing, you know, it's like a spaceship or something, you know. I mean, the whole thing was just cool, you know. And to hear it disparaged now bothers me, especially it's not even like younger generation just that does that. It's people that are like my age or older that act like it was some sort of dark time in sports because we had these. They refer to the stadiums as cookie cutter because, you know, a lot of them were similarly shaped, although they weren't really. They were different, you know, even within that. But you know, the dimensions were symmetrical and things like that because they were designed to be able to be multi-purpose stadiums where you could play, you know, primarily both baseball and football. Anyway, I like the fact that there's a lot of videos on the internet that people put up, you know, games from my childhood, from the 80s and stuff, 70s and 80s and early 90s, where you can still see what it looked like. And I like the circle stadiums. And, you know, this again, it sounds really weird because people like talk about, oh, it's sellout crowd, you know, it's this makes the event better. Part of to me, the nostalgia is like the stadiums where you saw a bunch of empty seats, because that's what I grew up on. So it's like, to me, I kind of miss that. And you know, like now, yeah, there's still some play. You know, there's still some like the Tampa Bay Rays stadium and in Oakland, but like Oakland, they put this tarp over the seats, so it just doesn't look good. But anyway.
When
Yeah,
you used to go to games and it was fewer people there, could you hear more what was going on the field?
I don't know. I don't really remember. I probably was never close enough to hear much. You know, I was never somebody, or my family wasn't where we could afford the expensive seats, so we were always probably a good distance away from what was going on. But it was still cool for me. I mean, they had the big TV screen, so it's not like you missed what was going on. You know, and really, to me, the best seats are like high above home plate because then you can see the whole field at the same time. Football's a little bit harder because um, you know, sometimes the action can be on one side of the field for a really long time. So if you're on the opposite side, then it's just sort of like off in the distance somewhere for a while. But then when they come back to your side, then you know, then it's cool again. But I didn't see as many football games live, but I saw plenty on television and a lot of the little, you know, that's the thing I don't like about the way people acted when the old stadiums went away, because I was like, there's so many memories of people, so many great games, classic games in those stadiums, like Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. I mean, the Steelers were like one of the best teams of the 70s and early 80s, and they went to the Super Bowl. They won like 4 Super Bowls, and so there were a lot of sellout crowds in those games, and a lot of classic games play, a lot of great teams. So to act like, oh, this was this terrible stadium they had to play in. I mean, I don't think people at the time, you know, when the Steelers were like on their way to the Super Bowl, the Steelers fans, they were, you know, waving the towels and stuff in the stands, weren't sitting there going, well, this game is good, but if only we were in a better stadium. I mean, I don't think there probably wasn't very many people thinking that. You know, maybe a few people when they were in line at the restroom or something. But I mean, for the most part, um, you know, you're caught up in the experience because it was a great experience. That was like, you know, memories and fun times, and you know, so I don't like it when people kind of, it's like it's a form of like history revisionism, you know, when people act like today, you know, that this was this terrible thing or something, like this terrible era in sports, the era of the multi-purpose stadiums or whatever. And to me, like that's my childhood. That's what I grew up with. So that to me is like how sports always will be, sort of, you know, in my mind, and how the modern stuff. It's not like I'm opposed to, you know, I mean, I've been to a few of the newer ones, and I mean, they're great stadiums. I mean, you can, the views are better in the new ones. They built the stadiums in a way that, you know, like in Arlington, for instance, where the Rangers play, and it's like there's almost no bad view. Like you can be, because I've walked around the concourse, like going to concessions and other stuff, so I've been out, like, you know, and it's gotten the same view of like the outfield seats, and you still get a really good view. There's the same thing in Houston at Minute Maid Park. So, um, you know, it's not to disparage the new structures or anything, but to me, there's something sort of missing, you know. And one thing in Houston was that the Astrodome had more comfortable seats. You know, you might not have had as good a view, but you had those cushioned seats, and now they have the hard flat ones. Like,
Ooh.
and I'm like, this is an improvement.
That's a big thing for me, having a comfortable seat.
Yeah, they're skinnier and, you know, harder. I'm like, why? You know, now there's some exceptions. Like the last time I went to Minute Maid, I was with my company when, you know, did a business trip where we rented out a suite. You know, well, that's a little different. Those things are made for comfort and all that. Um,
So it's a little, maybe a little bit of right. Find this seat uncomfortable, but rent a box.
yeah, I guess, but no, obviously not. A lot of people can't afford to do that. So that was the cool thing about the Astrodome, is even if you were sitting up in the distant seats, at least, you know, your seat itself was comfortable.
Do you think they did it to cram more seats in, or just because of cutting corners?
I don't know, probably a combination of factors, but one thing is in Houston, it's a retractable roof stadium, and those are extremely expensive. Um, it
Yeah,
adds it nearly doubles the cost of the stadium to have the
yeah,
roof,
and also the maintenance as well, the safety.
which which makes it all the more baffling why the Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, why they hardly ever open the roof. It's like if you're going to spend them, I know Jerry Jones is rich, but I mean, if you're going to spend that much money on having a retractable roof, why do you leave it closed all the time?
Well, it might be safety. See, what happened, there's been a bit of a cover-up about it, but with the Wembley Stadium, they did a retractable roof, and they're trying to make us believe that it was designed all along to only close by 1/3, rather
Oh,
than what the real truth happened is that they tried to close it, but the weight of the structure meant it was too dangerous to fully close. Because there's no way you would design something to only close by 1/3. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Jeff?
well, there was Texas Stadium where the Cowboys used to play in Irving, but it didn't actually. It stayed at that, like it was sort of partially closed looking, or they always used to refer to it as the hole in the roof. And the joke was that there was a hole in the roof of the stadium so God could watch the Cowboys.
Yeah.
But it was odd looking. But again, that's something I grew up with. It's like Texas Stadium, like the Cowboy games during the day were always going to look weird when the sun was out because of the way the shadows and the hole in the ceiling, like
Oh, yeah.
you would go from dark to light, back to dark, and it was odd looking. But that's just part of seeing a Cowboys game.
Especially on camera.
Yeah, and the camera technology was not what it was today. If they were doing, uh, a game at that stadium, if it still existed today, you probably wouldn't see as much of a glare and when they changed because they've improved the camera technology so that doesn't happen as much anymore. Um,
Although people can still get an idea of what the effect would have been. But just anyone watching anyone on YouTube, if there's a light behind them, if they're near a window, the camera adjusts to the light coming through the window and everyone becomes silhouetted. So it's just trying to adjust for the contrast. So I think MBTI would like put all this nostalgia, thinking of the past stuff. I think they would classify it under SI. But things like when it says, just to give people an idea, which past events do you re-experience?
well, I mean, some of the stuff I was just talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
watching old sports events and TV shows and movies and stuff, and kind of obviously I can't like completely place myself back in what it was like to experience those things as a child, um, but I can sort of reignite, some of the feelings, remember some of what it was like um, when I was experiencing those things the first time. So lately, I've been um, through YouTube. I've been watching. It all started when I don't know. I think I was a couple years ago. I found some people were posting some games, baseball games from like you know the time I'm talking about, my childhood in the '80s and stuff, and some before and after that. And so I had put some videos in like my watch later thing or whatever, and just hadn't got around to watching them. And for some reason, I was inspired recently to watch the 1984 World Series, or at least what was on YouTube of it. Um, and that sort of like when I watched that, of course, during the telecast, there were commercials for other things, like other events
Ah, that would
that
interest
were
me.
going on that weekend and stuff. And basically, that started me searching. Oh, okay. Well, let's see if that's on YouTube. And so, basically, it was this chain of when I would watch these things from and then I looked up there's a website called TV Tango that has old TV listings. So I started looking up what else was on in 1984, and then I started basically chronologically watching stuff from fall of '84, and continued to go. And I would add stuff to my watch later thing from using the TV listings and the stuff that was put on screen about upcoming events. So I've done that for the last few months, and I'm all the way up to the fall of '85 now. And in addition to like baseball and football games, I've watched some like boxing matches from Wide World of Sports, and I've been seeing a bunch of TV series, a bunch of Punky Brewster, and even discovered some series that I never saw the first time, like a show called Double Trouble, and some other cartoon stuff that I may or may not have seen before, some Bugs Bunny things, and Chipmunk Valentine's Day show, and just Charlie Brown stuff.
Are you going to? Although it might not have been shown in America at the same time, but now you're coming up to a point where the Doctor Who, where you sort of like left off, and maybe you could be an incentive to sort of like get back on the horse in terms of watching Doctor Who.
Yeah,
Mid-80s.
There's a couple of things on that, because some of the things that I've come across in the listings, I haven't watched because I've got them on DVD, and I don't currently have a good way to watch DVDs because my PS3 is broken, and that's what I was watching DVDs on. And I also don't have a working laptop anymore, which was another thing that I could watch. So I have one thing that can play DVDs, and that's my old iMac that's over there. And I could watch it from here, but the screen's kind of small for watching from over here. And if I watch up close, I gotta like get a chair, and I don't really have any real comfortable chairs either. So yeah, don't know about but Christmas is coming up, so I'm hoping that in the near future I'll have something I can do that with, and then I'll watch more DVDs. Doctor Who, I can't remember exactly when I first saw it. Because it wasn't anything like that I can remember. Like, there's not like context clues to let me know like when it was. The only thing that I remember for sure is that I was in a shop that was around then here in College Station called Starships and Dragons, that had things like comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, and other role-playing game book type stuff, and they had Doctor Who magazine, and that was the first place I ever saw that. And the issue that I bought was an anniversary issue that had stuff about all 7 of the classic Doctors, because and all I know is that the time that the magazine, I don't even know how current a magazine that was, but the magazine, basically it was one that came out, I'm guessing it was probably the 25th anniversary issue. That would be my guess, because like I said, it was some kind of anniversary issue, and it would make sense that would be it, because they had the Doctor and Ace on the cover, I believe, and Ace was the new companion.
Yeah, I used to get this magazine, but I stopped getting it as soon as they covered the new Doctor Who. Before it came out, before the new Doctor Who came out, this magazine was really good, because all they could do was like analyze the old stories in like great depth.
Did you have it back then, or?
No, I got this in. I started getting these magazines from about 2000 to 2005.
Okay. Because I would have been awesome if you actually had that issue. Because I have no idea where mine went. But the thing about it was anyway that they had stuff about all the doctors because it was the anniversary thing. So that was how, first of all, I even learned um, that all of those doctors existed in terms of the. By then, I knew that there was not just one doctor because the first one I ever saw was Tom Baker, and until uh, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the episode, but um, before the last Tom Baker episode, when a certain event happens and he's replaced, I had no idea that there was ever anyone else to play the Doctor. So it came as a complete shock to me, that scene. And to compound matters, the PBS station that we watched Doctor Who on, whether intentionally or not, uh, they didn't show the next episode after that happened. They went back to the first Tom Baker episode. So it was another however many months it was of them going back through all the Tom Baker episodes before they finally showed Castrovalva, the first Peter Davison episode. So I thought for a while that that was the last episode ever of Doctor Who, and that's how it ended with he just suddenly gets inhabited by this weird mummy thing, and then becomes a young guy, and that's how the show ends. So I was like, oh, that's a weird ending. But anyway,
Oh, was it Meglos? The keeper of Charkan?
what, you don't remember what the last Tom Baker episode was?
But I think that was Legopolis.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we don't want to get too much in the weeds on that one.
Yeah.
But,
anyway, so because that happened, I did know, that there was, another Doctor, but of course at that time I still I had no idea that was fourth and fifth. Because our PBS station never showed the ones before Tom Baker, at least they hadn't at that point. Then I went to San Antonio for, I don't remember now if it was in the summer or spring break, or it might have been spring break. And the San Antonio station there was airing them 30-minute episodes once a night, as opposed the Houston one had it like entire stories Saturday night, all in one.
how old were you when this was on?
I don't remember. That's what I'm saying is my only clue for the time frame is that when I got that Doctor Who magazine, I think it was the 25th anniversary, which would have been 1988.
Yeah.
And so obviously I'd already watched it for a while then, but I don't know how much. It might have been only like a year or so. So it might have been 87 when I first saw the show. I'm guessing it was somewhere in that 86 to 87 range. So I would have been 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was somewhere in there. I figured out over time with my fuzzy memories that the very first episode that I ever saw was The Ark in Space, because my first memory was actually of the scene where Sarah is inside the tunnel thing, and my memory sort of changed it from what actually happens. Once I resaw the show, I was like, well, that's not exactly what I remembered, because I remembered it as Sarah falling through some sort of garbage chute type of thing, and it wasn't exactly. I think I was mixing together that scene and the one from Genesis of the Daleks where she falls off the scaffold.
Right, yeah.
I think I had sort of blended those two scenes.
Who is this bad actress? Where's Sarah? Oh, it's the same one.
She's not a bad actress, Ben. How many times you say that? At least not in Doctor Who. I haven't seen her in anything else, so I couldn't comment on that. I always believed she was Sarah, even when they tried to ruin her character in the new series by retroactively pretending that she was in love with the Doctor, which never happened on the original show.
Just as a theme, I think they should the doctor should like. Or I think that as a good theme for children, the doctor should be like totally indifferent to the appearance of his companions. To like teach children a
I
moral
saw a
lesson.
movie and they had an ad for the Doctor Who Christmas special featuring the return of River Song, and I'm like, oh, come on. That character was already overused. Anyway, no, enough about that. What's our next topic?
Well, okay. So, what do you think your favorite year is?
My favorite year?
Yeah, your favorite year, and why?
In what sense?
Well, it, it's like if you could go back to any year, let's say in your childhood or as a young man.
Well, the thing is, there's so many other factors involved. How would how do I go back to it? Do I just have to relive the exact same experiences again, or do I have some sort of choice in the matter?
Well, if you like, someone gives you an option, like time machine, Doc Brown turns up. What year do you want to go back to, Jeff, out of your childhood?
It has to be in my childhood because I say there's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
things I would.
yeah. Because that's the whole point. Yes.
Well, see, again, I can't answer that because I don't. Gun to my head, I guess I would say 1985, just because I know there was so much cool stuff from that year. But I mean, part of me is like I'd go back to earlier, my first few years that I have no memories from because I was too young. um,
The same with
it's
me.
kind of it's kind of funny. The earliest memory that I can figure out when it was because there's a definite historical context to it was actually Ronald Reagan's inauguration in 1981. So I was 4 because I turned 5 in August of that year. Um, and I remember that I asked my mother something to the effect of, um, why we were changing presidents. I asked her like something like, did Jimmy Carter not want to be president anymore? And she said no, that he did want to be, but that he lost the election. I don't remember exactly what her words were. And I don't even remember if I said it out loud, but I remember thinking that was really unfair that, they would just take the presidency away from him. That, you know. So at 4 years old, like Jimmy Carter, I had your back, man. I was like, what do you mean he can't be the president anymore? What are you doing to the man? You know?
So if you see anyone there who'd known the MBTI, they'd have gone, feeler.
Yeah, no doubt. I established that at a pretty early age. Um, but yeah, that's funny because that's like my earliest memory of that I know when it was because of the historical thing. Obviously there's things I can probably remember before that, but they're just sort of vague on the time spectrum because there was nothing to like clue me in as to when it actually was that it was taking place. But I remember that was in Michigan. I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, from the time I was a few months old until I was 5. So my earliest memories are all from there. So I have kind of vague memories about where the living room was and the television, and we had an antenna on top of our roof, and there was a dial like underneath the television where you could turn it to change the direction of the antenna on top of the roof.
Ooh, very flash.
Um, and it was old and rusty and noisy. So when you turned the antenna on top of the roof, you hear,
You just said
kind
a
of.
movable antenna. I mean, that's very flash.
Um, but I remember that when I was a little kid, I was too young to go to school yet, and so during the daytime I was home, and my mother would like to take naps in the morning, but of course, I was on my own time whenever I wanted to be up. Uh, um, if she was awake, I probably would have been asleep, and vice versa. So I would want to watch TV, and I remember one of my favorite things to watch was game shows. I really liked game shows. but they were on like different channels that weren't in the same antenna direction.
Right.
So I'd be changing the channels, and it would wake my mom up from her nap. So she would come in and be mad at me and tell me I had to keep it on one station or one direction of the antenna because it was too noisy. So I remember that's another one of my early memories from there. I remember watching a few shows there. I remember watching The Wizard of Oz and The Incredible Hulk, both of which made me run into the kitchen and hide.
Oh yes, horrible green
With
man.
Wizard of Oz, it was when the Wicked Witch came in. I would hide from when that scene happened, when the smoke comes in and the Wicked Witch.
In the movie,
Yeah,
and also quite scary with the monkeys that they used as well.
Yeah,
Flying
Incredible Hulk.
monkeys.
It was when he changed into the Hulk, and since I watched
Yeah.
that was a TV series, and I watched it regularly, so I would each week I would run into the kitchen and hide when he turned into the Hulk. But I still liked it. I liked the Hulk. He just scared me when he did the changing scene. So yeah.
So
In recent years, they've made terrible movies about the Hulk that are really bad. So anyway,
do you remember
seeing they did better in the old days.
Do you remember seeing Transformers for the first time in '84?
Oh yeah, I mean I don't remember obviously the exact date or anything, but I remember Transformers. We got really into Transformers. I think the thing that we had been most into as kids, my brothers and me, before Transformers was He-Man. So Transformers came right on the heels of He-Man, like we were.
Yep.
I think He-Man kind of got left in the dust when Transformers came out, because it was like the coolest He-Man toys were the ones where like He-Man. There was one He-Man that had like this front armor plate thing that it could take damage. Like you would hit it once and it had like a crack, and then you hit it and it had a second one, and then you could roll it to reset it back to no damage. So that was like the most interactive like the He-Man toys got, and then Transformers changes completely between like car and robot or whatever. So that blew He-Man away.
I remember the first time you saw one. I remember the feeling of like the first time I saw a Transform, not just the cartoon, which was cool, but actually just remembering someone turning up with this thing that could transform.
Oh yeah, and the toys were like, I mean, even the boxes that came in were cool, and they had the like decoder thing. Like, do you remember there was like the little red strip that you had to hold over the bars to read it?
When you look at the profiles, they're pretty good profiles, even by like MBTI standards, like strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, they all have like a quote from the character,
Yeah.
And stuff. And yeah, they make them, the toys, they made them sound smarter than they were on the show. Because I think actually some of that came from the comic books where they were.
But better.
I think they were still were intended for a kid audience, but they were more kind of serious. Like they.
Oh yeah.
They weren't as goofy as the show was in some cases. So.
I got like a CD last decade. I got a CD of all of the issues in like JPEGs, and I was looking back at one of the early in 2008, and I came across a word I'd never heard before. It said enervated. It means depleted of energy. I think, whoa, they're using the word enervated in a kid's comic. But yeah, they're written to a much higher standard.
Yeah. They made more sense, and in terms of like, the Decepticons. Shockwave was the leader because he was like the smartest one. Like in the TV show, it was weird because Megatron was a doofus, yet Shockwave and everybody was subservient to him. And you're thinking, like Starscream was the only one who ever talked like he wanted to overthrow him. Like, and you're looking at it like, why didn't they all just gang up on him and take over?
Yeah, I mean, and then it did a storyline where Shockwave gave up the command to Megatron based on the logic of it, because Shockwave was such a slave to logic. And you probably love the film as well. How about the fact in the film then Galvatron comes along and he just like totally destroys Starscream and says this is bad comedy. It's
Yeah.
like, boom. That was like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, my younger brother is a big fan of that movie as well, and he's seen it even more times than I have. Um, and he said, recently when Leonard Nimoy died, a lot of people, watched Star Trek movies or Star Trek TV shows or whatever to celebrate, Leonard Nimoy's life or whatever, in tribute to him. And my brother instead watched Transformers the movie again.
Oh yeah, it was very good. I thought it was excellent as Galvatron. Yeah, really good. Yeah, and Orson Welles is in that as well. So
yes, one of his final performances.
Yeah, I think it's final one.
As a Unicron. And I don't know if you've heard, I think I might have mentioned this before, that I found online they actually had the recording like without the electronic effects that they added for Unicron's voice. You can just hear the raw recording of Orson Welles.
Ooh.
And to me, I found myself thinking they should have just gone with this because it sounds scarier than. It's like the electronic effect they added to it almost made it sound a little bit. It kind of cushioned it a little bit. And in the original raw recording, he has this just scary sound to his voice that it's just. I mean, it's just really awesome performance. Everybody was good in that.
As a kid, I don't know why you'd think in the imagination. Oh, we could buy a Death Star. How big would it be? Oh, you could buy Unicron. How big would it be?
It was also Scatman Crothers' last performance in that movie, who was the voice of Jazz.
Oh, and what about the guy who played Blur, who could like talk so quickly?
Yeah, John Machida, whatever, the Micro Machine Man. Yeah. And Eric Idle was even in that movie. He was
yes, just
the leader of the Junkions.
Yes, like Wreck-Gar or something. And he was like,
right.
And it's like,
whoa, this is commercial lingo.
Yeah, and he was like totally Eric Idle. It's like, whoa, this is like a little bit Clash of Two Worlds. So what is it about 1985? Is it just like the first year that you remember?
Well, no, but it's probably my favorite year for music ever in terms of, the stuff that was pop music from that year. So many of the top songs I still love today, and a lot of the movies and the TV shows from then. Like I said, I've been reliving some of that recently. Back in October, on the day that Back to the Future 2 was set in, my son and I went and watched a triple feature of all three Back to the Future movies. And of course, the original Back to the Future came out in August of '85. And I actually didn't see it in the theater when it first came out. I saw it many years later in the theater. I've now seen it twice in the theater. But when it first came out, the first time I actually saw it was at a Cub Scout lock-in at a mall that doesn't exist anymore in Bryan, Manor East Mall. And it was shown as one of the movies at that event. So there's a few movies I remember from that. Because sometimes they showed like new movies that were actually like still in the theater, and sometimes it was slightly older ones, or even or much older ones. Because I think they showed some, like old kung fu movies and stuff at least one year. We did it a few different times, but the lock-ins were like a thing where you stayed overnight in the mall, basically. And it was like whatever Cub Scout troops, got them all to themselves, and obviously a lot of stuff was closed, but the arcade was open, and some of the food places, and the theater, and there were different like games and events and stuff that took place and things like that. So it was a fun time. But yeah, I also went to there was a summer camp I went to called Camp Allen, and I'm pretty sure that was the first year that I went to that. Camp Allen was where I first danced with a girl.
Ooh.
And first had a crush on a camp counselor, you know, all those great childhood things, you know.
When you were about 9?
Yeah, yeah.
Early stuff. What was it? Early developer.
In some ways, not in other ways, yeah. I don't know. I yeah, there was. I mean, the thing is there was obviously a lot of volatile stuff going on in my childhood, my family life, but that was the case every year. So there, but when I mentioned two of the years, and I won't go into details why, but two of the years that I mentioned as being among my favorites when it comes to a lot of the entertainment and nostalgia and stuff I have for were 85 and 89. And my mother always cringes when I say that because those were two of her least favorite years, not because of any of the entertainment, but for what was going on in her personal life. You know, marriage to my father and all that stuff. So, yeah, there were a lot of. So that's why what I meant when I said it's hard for me to answer that because, like, as far as going back to a time, if I've just got to relive it the same way I did before, there's obviously a lot of fun, but there's a lot of painful memories too. There's a lot of things that, you know, were not fun the first time that I don't particularly want to go through again, you know. So, if I just had the ability to kind of pick out the things that I could re-witness, then that'd be a little different. Yeah, I could find, you know, I could pick the things that were the fun stuff, and you know, not have to relive the sad or scary parts.
Um, Part of the profile here says plain I misunderstood, and I think you've talked about that as a kid, where certainly your father just didn't understand you, or pretty much what it was about the artisan temperament. Or what about do you frequently have that?
Yeah, we're gonna have to pick up the pace with this if you're still talking about that first thing there.
Yeah, you complain about yes, it'll be about 4 hours long. Or complain of having been misunderstood. How about that? Not so much now, but maybe younger.
Yeah, I've done that before, sure. Um, if he's a well-educated or well-read, likes to pepper his speech with quotes and facts to show. Okay, I do like the quotes. I don't know what erudition means.
Learning.
Oh, no, I don't have any interest in showing off learning. Only when I like when okay, I'd like being able to spout you know music chart facts and stuff like that, but it's not. I guess you could call that showing off learning, but it's not like in a way to be like, oh, I'm so learned or whatever. It's more
Yeah.
just I enjoy that stuff, that those topics, being able to like you know ask people trivia questions, or I enjoy the fact people you know will try to stump me with things like that, and I'll you know get it. So it's you know it's kind of more of a skill of that kind of thing than it is really about learning, but capable of imposing their idea of the best timing for doing things on maybe I don't know exactly what that means, but
Neither do I.
likes to
Um,
set the pace by deliberately delaying or accelerating the process. Yes, I'm accelerating the process now.
yeah.
Claims he can sense which way events will unfold and warns against making. No, I've never claimed I can sense which way events will. I occasionally will have something that I'll sometimes label a premonition because I kind of saw something and then it happened, but I'd never claim that I know. Just it seems to be a coincidence when that happens. Often maintains he knows in advance what is about. No, no, that's not me. I I can make. I really don't even really get into the prediction game, but I can sometimes make educated guesses as to some things that will happen based on past experience. But I'm definitely not somebody who you know sits there and says, "Oh, I know exactly what's going to happen." You know, no, that's I am annoyed by the people that do that. So I
do you
definitely
think
don't do it
maybe,
myself.
do you think maybe in the area of in terms of relationships, like you can see where a relationship is going?
No, I wish I would have saved myself some pain in relationships. I think I'm good at ignoring the flags that pop up. retroactively I can say, well, I should have known when this happened, but I didn't because I was too caught up in the moment and enjoying what I was enjoying, so I didn't think about it.
What I will say, I mean, like that second bullet point is you have talked about like you're frequently able to recite, not so much recite, but talk about what Kersey wrote in his various books, and I don't
Well,
see that with other people.
I have read. I mean, I read Please Understand Me more than once. I even read it like out loud through the whole thing because I made like an audiobook version for somebody. Not a real good reading of it, but I just tried to get through it. Um, so, and obviously when you read something out loud, you have a tendency to remember it more. And then, I've read Brains and Careers all the way through once, and then parts of it a second time. Personology, I'm not even sure I got all the way through completely because a lot of it was sort of repeats from the previous ones. But yeah, I remember some things from it. And sometimes I'll remember basically sort of paraphrase, but not the exact quote until I look it up.
I mean,
But
so
again, it's not really about showing off or anything like that. It's just um, you know, there were some good points made on good lines that I liked. I always say that my favorite line from his books was the part in Please Understand Me Too, where he talked about art loosely defined as any action in which or anything in which the next action is a free variable. And I always thought that was a really cool thing. The free variable instead of a fixed constant. And that sort of he used that to sum up artisans, as that's what we want is. And it's true. I mean, when I talked to my mom just the other day, I was talking about how there's everything in my life that feels like an obligation. That's this thing I have to do. It looms over me and feels like this burden. And the more of those there are, the more weighted down I feel. The more freedom that I have, where the next action is entirely up to my choice of what I feel like doing next, the better I feel. And the more that things are fixed and out of my control, the worse I feel. It's pretty simple like that. Um, you know, so my ideal life, a lot of people will say like, what would you most want to do for like, a job or a career or something if you had the choice? And it's hard for me to answer that because honestly, what I really want is a lifestyle that I would choose, and the lifestyle, even that, is still not so specifically defined because basically it's just a life in which I had as many free variables for my actions as possible. I had the most freedom to do what I felt like doing at the time. That would be the best life for me.
so like comedian and uh, the ability to go on the radio and sometimes talk about host a music show, sometimes a political show or whatever you
Well,
felt
again,
like
I mean,
doing.
all that stuff, yeah, is, there are examples of it where there's some free variables, but there's also some examples of that where it's too fixed. The talking about a comedian and the typical like traveling like stand-up comedian type deal. They until you're like really one of the tops in the business or something, you don't have much choice. You're just trying to take any gigs you can get to make the money. So, there's not a whole lot of freedom there. I mean, there's
I,
some, but you're kind of limited.
I,
Now, somebody who's made some money doing other things like TV or movies or whatever, and doesn't have to live on, a stand-up, they can kind of be a little bit more selective and choose what dates that they want to do and how often they want to go on the road and stuff like that. So there's a little bit more freedom in that.
I mean,
Somebody
I
like
have.
I'm going to see Stephen Wright again in April. I've seen him before live, and I mean he still sells out big like stadium shows, like big arenas. I mean, not like huge outdoor stuff, but I mean like you know, the indoor arenas that are like basketball stadiums seat like, you know, 20, 25,000 people and stuff. And he'll have you know, the whole place packed. He still draws like, I mean, he can do shows for like $75, $80 a ticket and stuff. Somebody like that, obviously, you know, yeah, he could pretty much write his own ticket, as Letterman used to say, in terms of where he wants to do shows. I mean, he's still got to get the venues, but I mean, he's got a lot of freedom to live how he wants to live. But obviously, a comedian just getting their start doesn't quite have that. And I'm gonna have to be going here really quick, so
Okay. I would
wrap up you were planning. Go ahead and do it now.
I actually heard that that some American comedians that would like that never go on TV, they could survive their whole career with just 20 minutes of material because there were so many cities to travel to.
Oh yeah,
throughout the United States.
And obviously, some things have changed in that business in terms of the, you know, with the internet and all. Like, if somebody records you doing the show in one town and then it's online, then, you know, everybody's seen that act. Whereas in the old days,
that would make me furious.
Days, you know, you'd have your one chance to see whoever it was, and then they might not be back for a while. So if you didn't see that show, then you didn't know what they're at. But you know, they would go on TV shows, you know, like Carson or Letterman or whatever, and for the abbreviated act, you'd see like 5 minutes or whatever of their, you know, short set that they would do on TV.
Oh, I remember hearing a story about. I remember hearing a story about Jerry Seinfeld, where he would.
Oh, but just short story.
Yeah, sure. Like just for his 5 minutes that he did on like Johnny Carson, he like practiced it so much in front of like little audiences, so that by the time like he would like really selected down the material, so that when he made his national debut, it was like all of his best stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean Jeff Dunham, the guy, you know, the ventriloquist comedian guy, he was invited to basically audition to be on Johnny Carson. And it basically was all set to go on until, like, I guess whoever the main talent guy for Carson was, you know, was considered basically sort of the last line of defense before somebody got on the show. You know, he watched him do his act and he said, "No, I don't think you're ready." And he said, "Oh, you know." Obviously, he accepted that. He went back on the road, and that Carson talent guy, like, basically went to several of those shows he did after that, and got to the point he then told him, "Okay, now you're ready to go on." So that was how, you know, it was in those days, you know, where but it still showed that the guy was dedicated. You know, not only Jeff Dunham, but the talent guy, because, you know, he could have just said, "Well, just come back when you want to try again." But instead, he actually went to his shows so that he would know when he felt like he was ready to be on the show. So, yeah. Anyway.
Right, so because we're in the wind-up phase, so yeah, in the model of the ESFP, oh no, is it all black?
Yes.
Right, okay, I'll just read it out, because we're in the wind-up phase. Yeah, it says, what it says is that, the ESFP will have like TI minus, which basically means thinking of the past, remembering past errors, and trying to prevent them from happening again. Extrapolating, looking for signs of past repeating itself. So, for instance, that's why INTJs tend to be a bit more negative than INFJs, and INTJs look for things going wrong, and so that's why they're good at like planning for things going wrong. You know how David Kersey talks about the contingency planning, like planning for D-Day, and that might be like when we talked about things in the past. It's not talking about things happening in the future, but things in the past. TI plus, which is what NI plus, which is what INFJs have. Wondering about the future, believing in a good outcome, being more hopeful, holding the vision, bringing future into the present. Do you think your mother's more positive about the future? Like she'd like talk more about this. Like you're more past focused, and she was more future focused when she was younger. I don't know. Maybe it depends.
Well, yeah, I think
do you
she's
know?
more future focused. I wouldn't say she's more positive about the future. I think she worries more about the future. I don't really think about it either way, like positive or negative.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of have these vague hopes that cool things will happen in the future, but I don't really spend much time thinking about it. Whereas she worries about all the different possibilities.
Right then. Right, we're in the. Right, we've done that. Now we can do. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Right, and I'm just going to show a quick slide from Dario, sort of like Dario's definition of NI, which is. First of all, I'll show the brain areas. So that part of the brain, T6. Intuiting types sort of link this together with various possibilities, so they're able to see more threads into the future, whereas SJs sort of like just concentrate on one thread. So they tend to assume that the future is going to be like now. Do you think that's fair enough to say, Jeff, that SJs think the future is just going to be pretty much the same? Unless
I mean, they tend to think stuff's going to go wrong regardless.
Yeah. Right, okay.
And they talk as if the past is now. You know, they talk about these days stuff's like this, and then they cite some example from like 25 years ago or something.
Yeah, and I'll just fade this out.
When my coworkers, who's an ESFJ, was talking about how he didn't like the media, how they interact with like presidential candidates. And like now they ask him these stupid questions like boxers or briefs, and that was the famous thing they asked Bill Clinton in like '92. But he talked about it like it just happened the other day. But that's anyway.
That's like for us though as well. It's like the 1990s. The 1990s for us is like just the other day.
Yeah, well, in some ways it does feel like that. What I've noticed is like it seems like SJs do that even more, where it's like they really talk about it as if it was just the other day. Like it's like it just has no time, has no limit to them or whatever. It's just like the past is all just right there. Whereas for me, for a long time in my life, I really didn't access much of the past in my brain at all. And when I did, it was usually negative. And it's only been in the last, 5 to 10 years where I really got more nostalgic and more feeling and positives about things that I liked from the past. It took me a long time in my life to really start doing that.
Right, so this is what Dario wrote for T6. Purposeful futurist states what will happen, surely happen in the future, and or apply a symbolic meaning to a situation. Right, so that's that bit done.
Yeah, I don't do any of that.
Yeah, that's more. Did your mother do stuff like that? All symbols, meaning, the signs. So did she used to do like all the classical INFJ stuff?
Well, I remember her saying that the one thing that she didn't relate to in the INFJ description was the stuff about being psychic.
Oh yeah, there's a whole paragraph on it.
Yeah, she didn't really relate to that part, but pretty much all the rest of the INFJ profile. And she really she also really fits the Enneagram Type 2 profiles as well.
Huh. That's a good combination. There we go. I don't know what that means, transforming with the meta perspective. Maybe it means like standing back and looking.
It means Autobots transform and roll out.
Okay. And so withdraw from the
ESFP.
Did your mother do this? Withdraw from the world.
Good night.
Withdraw from the world and focus on your mind to receive an insight or realization.
I don't know. Ask her.
Check with the synergy results. Try out a realization to transform yourself. I don't really know what that means either. It's just like INFJs going into a trance, cutting themselves off from the world. That's how I see it.
Synergy. I don't think that's a real word. I think some marketing.
Synergy means two things coming together and working together better than individually. Better than some of its parts. But and this is the final bit. It's just going through this definition here. And it says
to answer problems. hold on, wait. Okay, I have it.
Parents were both NI dumb, so did they ever enter a trance?
And they were crazy, man. You don't even understand. Like, it was like every day I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? What's going on? Ah. All right.
Right. May over rely on the unconscious. Weird stuff. So what I will do now is end the screen and say, bye-bye, folks. Jeff is absolutely cream crackered, a.k.a. knackered, a.k.a. really tired.
A bunch of things that end in ackered.
Innovated. Bye, folks.
People of Earth.
Fit.